If I asked you to describe your financial situation, could you accurately tell me where you are, what you have? Would you even be willing to? No matter what your situation is, I promise you, I've heard worse. I'm Sara McCullough, certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst, and I'm sharing some of the stories I've experienced over my career, taking those lessons and turning them into actionable steps for you to use. This is I've Heard Worse. Today's episode is all about answering your questions about financial planning and working with a financial planner. And I'm going to start with just a brief overview of who do I work with, because I think that's kind of an underlying, we may not phrase it very often, and we definitely make assumptions about who I work with, what types of clients I work with, because I hear those assumptions all the time. And what I want to clarify for you is what my clients have in common isn't their investable net worth, isn't their income, isn't their stage in life. The common thread in all of my clients is that they are looking for clarity on their current situation. They're looking for information and they're looking for context so that they can make more confident decisions about their money. That's the common thread in my clients. That's who chooses to work with me. And I love that because it makes my days really, really interesting. And we're going to talk about some of the questions that I get asked in meetings, because those are probably some of the questions that you have too. And today we'll talk about the most common questions. I'm going to read the question, I'm going to share my answer, and I'm also going to share some extra thoughts on what do we do with this area. We're going to cover everything from the difference between income and cash flow to the different kinds of financial services you can get in Canada. And by the end of the episode, you're going to have a better idea of what's possible for you. Question number 1. How much of my income should I be saving? My answer? Enough. I get it. It's the smarty pants answer. And it's true. What you need to know is about 80% of the work that I do in a year across all of my clients is connected in some way to that very question. It is one of the most common questions, and it is the hardest question to answer for clients. And that's why financial planning can be my full-time job, because this is complex. And yes, there are rules of thumb. And yes, you might be able to just stop there and everything's going to be fine and everything's working. But if you really want to know the specifics, and if you really want to know your risk zones and your opportunities, you need to understand your full situation and you need to understand your full context. So that answer does vary for everybody. And I really believe that there is a time in everybody's life when they need to stop using the rule of thumb and work with their own actual number. That question also tells me that whoever's asking it is really unclear about both buckets. If you haven't listened to the 2 buckets episode, we'll put a link in the show notes. Go back and listen to that episode. If you are asking that question, it means that you don't know if you're making good financial decisions today, and you also don't know if you're going to be okay tomorrow. And so as you work through the process of answering those questions, you're going to know how much you need to save. Question number 2. How do I figure out how much money I can spend? Well, you just heard my answer to the first one. These questions are connected. But let me give you just a real high level, how do you figure this out? Because you can. You need to map out the income that lands in your bank account. So not your total salary, not what you signed an employment contract from. You need to map out how much lands in your bank account, when does it land there, and what money have you already spent in that time period? Because we all have money that we've already spent. Your housing costs, your car costs, your subscription costs. I want you to think of that as money you've already spent. And so when you map out what lands in your bank account and when, what have you already spent before your next pay lands, and what's left over? And then you're going to look at your priorities. What else needs to happen? Probably groceries, gas, clothes. Those are most of our big 3 expenses. And then if there's something left after that, that's the money you can spend without feeling guilty, without worrying. But when you know that amount, you can make actually choices ahead. And that is a powerful place to be. Question number 3, how often should I review my finances? Generally speaking, I would like you to check in with your financial self once a year. And depending on your situation, that may be just a quick update. Maybe you already track your numbers, and maybe that once a year check-in doesn't have to be detailed depending on what's going on. It might not take you a long time depending on how you track these things. But I really recommend checking in once a year. If we're talking about finances and money in, money out, once a year is good. I do have a number of clients who meet with me 2 to 3 times a year because that really is what keeps them feeling like they have a handle on all aspects of their finances. And that is what allows them to make comfortable day-to-day decisions. I also have a group of clients that really check in with me and do a thorough update every 18 to 24 months. So again, this is going to be a little bit personal and what makes you feel confident and secure. But I do believe a once a year check-in is a good idea for everybody. Question number 4, what's the difference between income and cash flow? Well, income is what's coming in. What comes into your household? Where is it coming from? How much is it? And that's just one thing, one direction. What's coming in? That's your income. Cash flow includes not just what's coming in, but also what's going out. The when, why, and how of what's going out. So you can think of income as a part of cash flow, but cash flow also needs to include what's going out. Question number 5, what credit score should I be aiming for? I think this is the wrong question. If this is a question you have, if you have been searching for an answer, I would like you to start looking at what financial behaviors should I be building? What financial habits should I have to be responsible, to meet my obligations, to do what I need to do to keep myself stable? Because if you do all of those things, you will have a good credit score. So I want you to think of credit score as an outcome, not a goal. Question number 6, why are there so few advice-only financial planners in Canada? Well, this question could have its own several episodes, but let's talk about 2 of the bigger reasons that there are not a lot of advice-only financial planners in Canada, because this actually is not true in other countries. So if you look at how the UK, Australia, and even the US have structured their wealth management and financial planning spaces, they have made different choices. Australia and the UK started where we are, and they moved over to a different strategy. But currently in Canada, there are 2 main reasons that I believe it is so hard to find a true advice-only financial planner. The first is we call anything and everything a financial plan. And there are currently 2 provinces in Canada who regulate the term financial planner. And the second one is pretty recent. Quebec is the only province that has very clear, long-running regulations around who can call themselves a financial planner. So you've probably run up against a financial plan or a financial planner, and you didn't get a plan, and you didn't get a planner, and you didn't get any planning done. You got a sales pitch, probably related to your investments. And maybe you got advice that you weren't sure was objective or not. So part of the reason that it's hard to find somebody doing this is because overall, we're not really sure what it is. If more people understood it, might they choose it as a career? I believe that's true. If more Canadians were offered actual financial planning that was in their own best interest, I think they would take it. So that's the first reason we have misused this term. The second reason that I believe this is a scarce field in Canada is because in the wealth management space, we have stapled together the costs of financial planning and investment advice. And we've done two things at the same time. We've stapled the costs together. So if you ask an investment advisor, or if you read any mutual fund literature about why are the fees where they are, the answer or the literature will talk about this fee covers not just your investment management, it also covers your financial planning. But the person getting paid or the corporation getting paid is under no obligation to do your financial planning in a way that's beneficial for you. The other thing we do simultaneously in the wealth management space very often is say to clients, your financial planning is free. If you bring me your investments, I'll do your financial planning for free. Well, it's never for free. You're paying. It's right there in the fee explanation. So we say both things. In the wealth management space, we say both things at the same time, and it's confusing for clients. I think there is room for change. I think clients can and should demand change. And I love that this is a field that can grow. Question number 7. What does an advice-only financial planner actually do? And you can see why this is a fair question right after the explanation I just gave you. So what do I do for my clients? I actually answer their questions about their money so that they can make confident decisions based not just on full information, but also based on their own context. So they don't just have full information, they know how to apply this to themselves, and they can see recommendations based on what they've told me. So what I do is really listen to clients, understand their current situation, understand their goals, and then I translate that back to them in the form of a financial plan. So I'm not telling them what to do, what they should do. I'm telling them what they told me they wanted. So I'm just translating here. And that has such a huge impact for their day-to-day lives. So what do I actually do for clients? I actually answer their questions so that they know how to get to where they want to be, how they're going to be financially stable, and how they are going to manage the risks that they have. Question number 8. What is a fiduciary and do I need one? That's really a two-part question. A fiduciary is somebody who has a legal responsibility to put the client's needs first. And again, in Canada, this is a gray area for a lot of reasons. When we talk about securities regulators and something like a portfolio manager's license, so remember, this is directly related to the buying and selling of securities and how an investment advisor can operate. The securities regulators say that portfolio managers do have a fiduciary duty. And so if you are a portfolio manager and you are not putting your client's best interest first, you can lose your license to buy and sell securities. As a financial planner, do I have a fiduciary responsibility attached to my financial planning designations? I don't. Not in the same way that securities regulations are set up. Is there a financial planning organization that has a fiduciary pledge that I can sign? There is, yes. If a client felt that I had given them incorrect advice and they lost money and they sued me, might a court decide that I had a fiduciary responsibility? Absolutely. Yes. And you've lost money and we're in court. That is a bad outcome. So I've answered the first part. What is a fiduciary? Now let's answer the second part. Do I need one? I believe that you need an advisor that will put your needs first, not because there's a stick held by regulators or the courts, but because it's the right thing to do. Because that they could not sleep at night if they weren't putting their client's interest first. And that, you can't fully regulate that. And I'm going to end this answer with a reminder that Bernie Madoff was a fiduciary. Question number 9. Are there advisory services that I could or should get from a bank? I think you should get banking advice from a bank. I think sometimes they can provide really good advice on debt products, credit card products. But what I want you to remember is, what are the banks set up for? So this is not to say that there are not very good people in bank branches, because there are. But I want you to also think about the reality of the business that the banks are running. They are running a transactional business. They are not running an advisory business. They are running a transaction-based business. And so all of their systems that all of those employees operate in are set up to maximize transactions. Can you get good advice in there? I believe you can, especially if you know your own stuff and can ask the right questions to get the information that you need. But do I think you can rely on them for comprehensive financial advice because they are familiar and because they are big? I do not. Question number 10. If I am totally overwhelmed with my finances, what first step can I take? I love this question, and I love the idea that you might be listening right now and you are totally overwhelmed with your finances and you've listened this far anyway, because that is a first step. What I want you to do if you are feeling totally overwhelmed with your finances, the first step I want you to take is to write it down. I want you to write down, I am totally overwhelmed by my finances. My finances make me want to cry. Or my finances did make me cry. Recently. Right now, in fact. I want you to write it down. I want you to say it out loud. And I eventually want you to say it to somebody else. Because once you do that, other things will happen. Because when you are running it around inside of your head, you're not going to solve any of that overwhelm. You're actually going to increase it. So what you need to do is get it outside of your head. So if you can, once you've written down, I am totally overwhelmed, I want you to write down the biggest, scariest thing. And then I want you to figure out what to do about it. And whether that is contacting a professional right away, whether that is finding out more information on your own, maybe doing a little bit of exploring, if that's the way you work best, then do that first. But I want you to start taking this big overwhelm with your finances. And I want you to start being able to see the individual pieces. Because once you can do that, it becomes less overwhelming. And once you can get familiarity with the pieces, that's when you can start putting everything back together in a way that does not overwhelm you. The caveat to that answer is if you are overwhelmed because of debt, I do want you to get immediate help with that. And I think that may involve an expert. If you are overwhelmed because of debt, I do want you to be very clear very soon about how close are you to the edge, because hitting a debt wall can be devastating emotionally, financially, for your day-to-day life. So if you are overwhelmed because of debt, please get some expert advice quickly. This is a good time to remind everybody listening that I am a certified financial planner, and this is what I do as my career. And this episode and those answers were general information. That before you take what I said and apply them specifically to your situation and start making changes, I want you to get individual advice so that you're sure that the individual changes that you are making actually apply to you, that you have applied the information correctly, that it fits in your context. Because I do want you to know what your specific risks and opportunities are. If this episode didn't answer your big burning question about financial planning, I would love it if you sent me your questions. You'll find an email for me in the show notes. Please send those over. Maybe they'll make the next episode for our Q&A. And remember, asking questions is how you are going to find your answers. And if you've asked questions before and not gotten answers, I am so glad that you listened to this episode, because what that tells me is that you know that the answer is out there. And I want you to keep asking those questions to somebody different, because the answer that you need is out there. And once you find it, that will change not just your day-to-day experience, it will change your relationship with your money. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out the other episodes. There are 12 in this series, each one focusing on a different important aspect of financial planning. You can listen from start to finish, or pick and choose the episodes that matter most to you. Consider sharing an episode with someone else who needs to hear it. Thank you for liking and subscribing. And remember, no matter what you think of your financial situation, I've heard worse, which means you and I can make it better.